I'm very excited because in this How Do I video I will show you how to use the observer pattern to track record changes in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. In this video you will see how easy it is to use the observer pattern to track record changes. This pattern shows you how to track all the record changes against a defined table or a set of tables. The problem is that Dynamics NAV has the built-in ability to track all record changes against any table. However, it doesn't always fire the triggers for every table. So we will solve this by creating a setup table to define which tables you want to track, and optionally triggers that you would like to fire, and then link this up to the standard triggers in Code Unit 1. So there are a number of steps behind this pattern. In the first step I'm going to explain the observer pattern in general. Then I will create an observer table to hold the information about the concerned tables. In the next step we will then create an observer code unit, and in the last step I'm demonstrating this where the pattern is used in Dynamics NAV. So let's get started with the first step and describe the observer pattern in general. Now basically the observer design pattern will enable a subscriber to register with and receive notifications from a provider object. The observer pattern is actually suitable for any scenario which requires push-based notification. The pattern defines a provider, which is also known as a subject or an observable, and 0, 1 or more observers. These observers will register with the provider. Whenever a predefined condition, event, or a state change occurs, the provider is then automatically notified, or will automatically notify all of the observers by calling one of their methods. So to summarize the observer pattern, to implement it, it requires a number of objects. The first object is a provider or a subject, which is the object that sends the notifications to the observers. We also require an observer, which is an object that receives notifications from a provider. And then we need a mechanism that will allow the provider to keep track of the observers. Let's have a look now in the second step and create an observer table to store the information about the tables and the events we would like to keep track of. So in Dynamics NAV you can very basically create a table, which I have done right here, table 50,000 with the name observer. And in that table I have defined a number of fields. First we have the table ID, which is going to record the ID of the table which we are storing. And as you can see in the properties, I have created a table relation to the object table where I am filtering on the type table. The other fields are Boolean fields, track insert, track modify, track delete, and track rename, to identify if we need to track the insert, the modify, the delete, or the rename events for the table ID which we are observing or monitoring. Now that we have created our setup table to define which other tables we would like to keep track of the changes, it is now time to create the observer code unit, which will set the table trigger setup parameters and also subscribe to the on-database triggers and track the events. As you can see, there is a code unit 50,000 with the name observer, which has a number of local functions defined. The first function, getTableTriggerSetup, uses a number of parameters. We have the table ID, and then the events on database insert, on database modify, delete, and rename, which are booleans that will be passed by a reference. Depending on the table ID that we are receiving, and if we can find information in the setup table about that table ID, we will then retrieve the values of the booleans and set them here on our on database insert, modify, delete, and rename booleans in this code unit. That's a get table trigger setup to define if we really need to log the events. Then we are using a number of local event subscriber functions, for example, the onDatabase insert. It will receive a record ref from the table for which the insert is occurring. And then, depending if we can find information about that in the observer table, and if we need to track the insert, we can then write and execute the code which will track that event. The same kind of code is of course valid for the other events, the modify, the database delete, and the onDatabase rename. And as you can see, these are event subscribers, so these functions that you define, you can subscribe them directly to code unit 1 in this case. Where you can, for example, subscribe to the onDatabase insert and similar events. If you do that, then you can define them here as local functions. If you are running an earlier version of Dynamics NAV which doesn't support events, then you will have to program it in a different way, and then you cannot use local functions. But I will show you also an example of that later on. Now that we know how to create the observer table and the code unit which is going to perform the monitoring, let's now have a look at some real-life examples in Dynamics NAV where this pattern is already applied. In Dynamics NAV, there are already two code units who are implementing this pattern in some way. We have the changelog management functionality and the integration management functionality. Now, even in NAV 2016, they are still using functions in code unit 1 and not events, but I suspect that in the future, of course, that might change. Let's have a look at code unit 1 application management, how this is integrated. As you can see, we have the onDatabase insert trigger or function in that code unit, and when it fires, it is going to have a look in the changelog management code unit to log the insertion. And then there is also a link here or hook to the integration management where it will fire the onDatabase insert function. If you have a look at the changelog management code, let's open its definition. And as you can see in the changelog management code unit 423, and the log insertion is then called. And then we are working with a number of regref variables to define for which fields we are implementing this. If you also have a look in this code unit, here you will find examples on the functions, for example, get database table, for which table are we performing the logging, which actions do we need to log, or do we need to log it at all. We have that first function. And then you have all of the other functions in here to be able to log the insertion, modification, rename, and all of the other events. So that's the first example, changelog management. Another example is the integration management. As you can see, there's also a link here in code unit 1. And if we follow its definition, then we are going to end up here in the onDatabase insert, where first we are going to verify if the integration has been activated, yes or no. And then we will log the insert in this case. So we have a very similar functionality in this code unit with similar functions also here in the beginning. Get database table trigger setup, which is our table or the function which is going to verify in the table if we need to perform integration whenever an insert, modify, delete, or rename event occurs. So we have two examples in Dynamics NAV, the changelog management, integration management. Both of them have hookups in code unit 1. They're not yet using events, but I'm pretty sure, or I suspect in the future, that this might be, let's say, upgraded to be using the event methodology in Dynamics NAV 2016. Let's summarize the steps. In step 1, I explained in general what is the observer pattern and its elements. In step 2, we had an approach on how we can get started by creating first the observer table and then the observer code unit which is going to do the monitoring, and we did this using events. In step 4, I demonstrated with some examples in Dynamics NAV in the application where this pattern is used. So in this video I covered the following topics, which is using the observer pattern to track record changes. To learn more, please visit the following resources. Thanks for following this short video to explain how to use the observer pattern to track record changes in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. This video in the How Do I series for Dynamics NAV is brought to you by Microsoft and Platan. See you in another one.